People do bizarre things when panic hits, but nothing says, "I trust my instincts," like trying to scare off a bear by yelling your Wi-Fi password or attempting to fight hypothermia with energy drinks. And trust me, this is only the warm-up. 1. A guy once panicked during a mild trail encounter with a deer. Yes, a deer, nature's confused golden retriever, and decided the best defense was to assert dominance by singing opera at full volume. According to witnesses, he belted out something between a car commercial jingle and a dying accordion. The deer, understandably horrified, trotted off, probably questioning humanity's place in the ecosystem. Meanwhile, the guy strutted around afterward like he'd outsmarted a bear. I love that for him. A man so scared he basically attempted musical theater as a survival strategy. It's the first time in recorded history that an animal fled not from danger, but from secondhand embarrassment. If you ever wonder why wildlife avoids humans, remember this. We weaponize panic by screaming improvised Broadway numbers into the trees. 2. One woman got lost in a national park and, in a blaze of creativity fueled entirely by fear and zero logic, tried to communicate with rescuers by flashing her phone flashlight at passing birds. Yes, birds. Not helicopters, not hikers. Birds. Because when panic takes over, suddenly every pigeon becomes an emotional support drone. She kept waving her phone like she was at a Taylor Swift concert, hoping the wildlife would carry news of her location to someone with opposable thumbs. Shockingly, the birds did not form a search and rescue coalition. They did not file a missing persons report. They just flew away, presumably irritated that this glowing human lighthouse kept interrupting their lunch. Eventually, real rescuers found her, and I'm sure the birds were thrilled to stop doing absolutely nothing. 3. A man camping for the first time heard rustling outside his tent and immediately assumed he was about to be mauled by something large, carnivorous, and trending on Animal Planet. His solution? He started apologizing to the forest, out loud, repeatedly, like he'd just bumped into a stranger at Whole Foods. "Sorry, sorry, sorry," he whispered into the darkness, apparently hoping predators respond well to polite customer service energy. Turns out it wasn't a wolf or a mountain lion. It was a raccoon investigating his trail mix and probably judging him harder than any therapist ever could. Imagine being so terrified you start groveling to a woodland creature shaped like a chubby bandit. Forest animals don't need to fight us. Our self-preservation instincts are already doing the comedy. 4. One guy panicked during a sudden rainstorm on a hike and tried to outrun the weather. Not get to shelter, not find cover. Outrun the weather. He sprinted down the trail like he was being chased by God's sprinkler system, sweating, yelling, convinced he had a chance at defeating atmospheric moisture. Spoiler, he did not. Rain, famously undefeated since Earth existed, landed every shot. By the time he reached the parking lot, he looked like a soggy loaf of bread trying to hold it together emotionally. Weather doesn't negotiate. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't say, "Wow, he's fast, I'll back off." And yet, here we are, watching people attempt track and field events against the sky. 5. A panicked fisherman once dropped his phone into a lake and immediately dove in after it like he was rescuing a toddler. Full clothes, shoes, pockets packed with snacks, straight into the water with the form of a brick. His logic: I might still save it if I'm fast enough. Sure, maybe if the phone was actually floating, or waterproof, or capable of crying for help. Instead, he emerged gasping, freezing, furious, holding nothing except lake muck and regret. Meanwhile, the fish, who have seen far worse, calmly swam around wondering what human ritual they'd just witnessed. Nothing screams peak panic like launching yourself into a lake to save a device specifically designed to not survive lakes. 6. A couple on a scenic trail spotted a snake, tiny, harmless, practically decorative, and panicked so hard they tried to climb the same tree at the same time. Picture two adults scrambling upward like malfunctioning squirrels, stepping on each other's shoes, grabbing branches that absolutely couldn't support the combined weight of their fear. The snake didn't move. It just watched them, probably wondering if humans are okay. Spoiler, we're not. They stayed in the tree a full 20 minutes until a jogger passed by and casually informed them the snake was the wildlife equivalent of a toddler with no teeth. Nothing says survival instinct like retreating upward into a structure you can't descend without crying. 7. A man got turned around on a wooded trail and convinced himself he was moments from becoming a Discovery Channel cautionary tale. So, what did he do? He built a defensive perimeter out of sticks. Not sharpened sticks, not strategically placed sticks. Just a messy floor arrangement of twigs that wouldn't even stop a confused chipmunk. Then he sat in the middle of it like he'd invented medieval fortifications. When rescuers found him, he proudly announced he had secured the area. Yes, he absolutely secured it. Against nothing, not even gravity. Honestly, if a leaf fell wrong, that barrier would have collapsed into symbolic modern art. 8. One panicked hiker thought he was being stalked by a cougar because he kept hearing something rustling behind him. He walked faster. The sound walked faster. He jogged. The sound jogged. He sprinted. The sound sprinted. Terrifying, right? Except it wasn't a cougar. It was the bag of beef jerky he'd clipped to his backpack, rhythmically thumping like an overly enthusiastic stalker. He was essentially running from his own snack. At full speed, for half a mile. Nothing showcases human instinct like fleeing from dried meat you willingly purchased. Somewhere in the woods, the real cougars probably heard him yelping and thought, "Not touching that. Too chaotic." 9. A novice camper once mistook the sound of distant thunder for a stampede. Not elk, not bison, a stampede of unknown angry animals that apparently travel with bass-boosted sound systems. In a storm, instead of checking weather forecasts or, looking at the sky, she grabbed her backpack and hid behind a bush because bushes famously stop large mammals. And weather. When rain started, she doubled down on her theory. The animals are drooling. By morning, she'd created an entire imaginary ecosystem of thunder-powered beasts. Meanwhile, the storm clouds above were like, "Ma'am, please." 10. A man kayaking flipped his boat in shallow water, like ankle-deep shallow, and panicked so dramatically he tried to swim away from the kayak while screaming for help. The water was roughly the depth of a puddle with ambition. When a nearby camper yelled, "Dude, stand up!" the man continued thrashing like he was in a Hollywood shipwreck scene. Finally, he stood, dripping, humiliated, and only then realized he'd lost his sandals. Somewhere out there, a frog is living its best life, wearing his left one. Panic doesn't just cloud judgment, it deletes it. 11. A hiker panicked when he thought he saw a bear in the distance and immediately threw his entire backpack at it, hoping to establish boundaries. First, backpacks are not boundary-establishing tools. Second, the bear was a stump shaped like a disappointed father figure. Third, all his food, water, and gear were in that pack. So, after assaulting a tree, he now had no supplies and had to watch his belongings scatter like confetti in the world's saddest parade. Nature didn't even have to intervene. The man essentially mugged himself. 12. A woman heard branches cracking behind her on a forest trail and panicked so thoroughly that she tried to hide behind her own shadow. She pressed herself against a tree like she was in a badly directed spy movie, whispering, "Don't see me," to absolutely no one. The creature making the noise? A turtle. A single turtle, moving at the explosive speed of eventually. The turtle was probably as startled as she was because it suddenly found itself being treated like a horror villain in a low-budget nature documentary. Honestly, imagine being so scared you try to camouflage by becoming one with a tree. Even the tree was like, "Ma'am, please, get a grip." 13. A panicked outdoorsman once tried to ward off what he thought was a lurking predator by aggressively reciting fun facts about sharks. Wrong habitat, wrong animal, wrong everything. But that didn't stop him. He just stood there in the woods shouting, "Sharks have no bones," as if any land-based threat would be intimidated by marine trivia. Eventually, the predator revealed itself, a hiker wearing too much beige. This man, fearing for his life, essentially attempted to educate the wilderness into sparing him. Honestly, I wish wildlife had Yelp. They'd give humans 1 star. Too loud, too weird, talks about sharks for no reason. 14. A family camping near a lake heard splashing at night and panicked so intensely they began throwing granola bars toward the water as a distraction. Their theory, whatever creature was out there would get bribed by oats. Turns out the splashing was their own inflatable raft drifting against the shore. No monster, no intruder, just the wind gently moving plastic. And yet, they spent a full 15 minutes conducting oat-based diplomacy with absolutely nothing. Granola, humanity's attempt at woodland negotiation, loved by no creature except ducks and people pretending to be healthy. 15. A man in the desert panicked after getting slightly disoriented and decided the best navigation strategy was to follow the sun, not toward shade, not toward a road, straight toward the very thing trying to roast him alive. He walked so long in the wrong direction that when rescuers finally intercepted him, he proudly announced he was chasing daylight. Yeah, it was chasing him back and winning. The sun doesn't need help, it doesn't need encouragement, and it definitely doesn't need a man in cargo shorts trying to race it across the landscape. At least he stayed hydrated by drinking 3 warm sodas he thought counted as electrolytes. 16. A guy once panicked during a mild desert wind gust and decided the smartest move was to anchor himself to the nearest object, which happened to be a tiny shrub about as sturdy as a middle school handshake. He wrapped his arms around it like a koala hugging a cardboard tube, genuinely convinced nature's version of decorative confetti would save him from being blown into the afterlife. The wind was barely strong enough to move his hair, yet there he was, clinging with the emotional intensity of someone auditioning for a survival documentary no one asked for. Meanwhile, hikers walked by, watching this man gripping shrubbery like it held the secrets of the universe. The wind didn't care. The shrub definitely didn't care. And honestly, the only thing in danger was his pride, which absolutely flew away. 17. A panicked woman on a forest trail heard a distant howl. Coyotes, maybe a dog, possibly just someone's stomach, and her immediate instinct was to throw her bag of trail mix into the air as a distraction. Not away from her, straight up. She ended up covered in raisins, nuts, and those little fake M&M imposters nobody likes. If anything had been watching her, it now saw a snack dispenser malfunctioning violently. When the howl happened again, she bolted, leaving behind a sad little pile of granola and despair. The actual wildlife ignored her entirely, because even predators have standards. Imagine being so scared you deploy snacks like you're in an action movie, but forget gravity exists. Somewhere, a squirrel still talks about the day food rained from a terrified woman. 18. One guy camping near a river heard splashing at night and convinced himself the river was rising rapidly, despite the water level being lower than his expectations for humanity. His panic plan? Start dragging everything, including a full cooler, farther up the bank in the dark. He managed to trip, fall, spill the cooler, and send half his food floating lazily downstream like a Viking funeral for sandwiches. When morning came, he discovered the splashing wasn't a flood. It was a duck, a single duck, testing the acoustics of the water. Meanwhile, this man spent the night rearranging his entire campsite like nature had personally filed an eviction notice. The river remained stable. His dignity did not. 19. A hiker saw what he believed was a freshly dug mountain lion den, and calmly, rationally, wisely, did the only thing his panic allowed. He threw his water bottle into it. Why? To check if the animal was home. Right. Because if it wasn't home, congratulations, now you've lost your water. And if it was home, you've just thrown a projectile at its face. Genius. The hole wasn't a den. It was a drainage ditch for runoff. The only thing inside was mud and his rapidly declining self-awareness. When he crawled in to retrieve the bottle, he ended up stuck half in, half out, like a confused prairie dog questioning every decision that led him here. The mountain lions slept soundly that night, blissfully unaware of humanity's ongoing collapse. 20. A tourist once panicked at the sight of a raccoon approaching her picnic and attempted to scare it off by pretending to be bigger. Not by raising her arms, but by inflating herself with deep breaths like a pufferfish training for a yoga competition. She stood there, expanding dramatically, huffing like she was about to blow down a wolf's house. The raccoon was unfazed. It stared at her like she'd just started reciting poetry to intimidate it. Eventually, the raccoon got bored and left, which she interpreted as victory instead of the reality. The raccoon simply had better things to do. Nothing screams top of the food chain quite like hyperventilating at a small striped creature stealing your tortilla chips. 21. A man kayaking down a calm river panicked after seeing a log floating alongside him and assumed it was an alligator tracking him. His escape strategy? Paddle backward. Yes, backward, against the current, which pushed him steadily closer to the log he was supposedly fleeing. He paddled harder, sweating, praying, spinning in circles like a confused blender. The log continued drifting peacefully, unaware it had been cast as the villain in this low-stakes nature thriller. Eventually, he tipped over, dramatically, in waist-deep water. He then stood up, dripping dignity, staring at the log like it owed him an apology. If logs had Yelp profiles, this man would have left a review. 22. A hiker panicked after realizing she'd wandered off the main path and tried to mark her trail for rescuers using lip gloss. Bright pink, fruit-flavored lip gloss smeared onto rocks like she was decorating the forest for a middle school birthday party. By the time rescuers found her, the heat had melted the gloss into sticky, berry-scented puddles that attracted approximately every ant within a 2-mile radius. She wasn't lost. She'd looped in a tiny circle. The rescuers followed the scent like they were tracking a runaway boy band merch display. Nature's creatures were deeply confused. She did survive, but dozens of ants probably left, thinking they'd stumbled into the woodland version of Sephora. 23. A guy hiking in foggy weather panicked when visibility dropped and decided the safest way to navigate was to follow the sound of his own voice. So he started humming loudly and walking toward where he thought the sound was coming from. That's right, he tried to follow himself. Shockingly, this did not work. Sound travels, he does not. He ended up walking into a shrub, again, because shrubs are the unsung heroes of human panic, and couldn't figure out why his voice seemed to be moving away. When another hiker eventually found him, he was cupping his hands around his mouth, whispering, "Where are you?" to himself, like a man trying to summon his own ghost. The fog lifted long before his self-awareness did. 24. One woman camping in bear country panicked at a sudden snapping twig and responded by aggressively zipping and unzipping her tent, assuming the noise would confuse predators. Instead, she just sounded like a frustrated luggage salesman doing product demos at 1 a.m. Meanwhile, the twig snapping was caused by, brace yourself, her friend returning from brushing their teeth. The friend stood outside watching the tent convulse like a trapped windbreaker, while the woman inside tried to intimidate nature using the power of zippers. The bears slept through the entire ordeal, but the embarrassment? Eternal. 25. A man panicked during a nighttime hike when his flashlight died and immediately concluded he was now in full survival mode. His strategy: lie flat on the ground to blend in, as if predators wander around thinking, that human-shaped pancake must be a rock. He stayed perfectly still for nearly an hour, occasionally whispering motivational quotes to himself. When another pair of hikers found him, they nearly tripped over his very committed camouflage cosplay. Turns out, if he'd taken 2 steps to the left, he would have found a perfectly bright trail marker. But no, fear transformed him into a decorative rug. 26. A panicked tourist in a national park saw steam rising from a geothermal vent and decided the safest option was to run in zigzags because that's how you escape crocodiles. Wrong country, wrong environment, wrong predator, wrong everything. She sprinted back and forth like a malfunctioning Roomba while her family begged her to please stop before she twisted an ankle or collided with a visitor center. Steam vents don't chase you. They don't lunge. They don't strategize. They just exist. Calmly. Meanwhile, this woman was out here performing interpretive panic dance for an audience of highly unimpressed hot rocks. 27. A guy walking through dense woods started hearing twigs crack on both sides of him and assumed he was being flanked by predators. Plural. So he did the logical thing, climbed onto a stump and began loudly announcing he was not worth the calories. Very motivational, very TED Talk, very unnecessary. The twig crackers turned out to be 2 hikers trying to pass him on the narrow trail, but unable to get around because he'd positioned himself like a motivational guru atop a tree pedestal. Imagine trying to pass someone who insists on monologuing to predators that do not exist. The hikers deserved hazard pay. 28. A camper once woke up to the sound of heavy breathing outside his tent, real deep, slow exhalations, and panicked so thoroughly he began reciting every movie quote he could think of to assert confidence. The creature breathing? A cow. An actual farm cow from a nearby pasture that wandered over to sniff his tent. Meanwhile, this man was delivering the least threatening monologue of his life, quoting action films at Barnyard Livestock. The cow eventually left, likely wondering why humans are allowed outside unsupervised. 29. A woman hiking in the mountains panicked when her phone lost signal and immediately assumed she'd entered some kind of electromagnetic danger zone. Her solution? Hold her phone above her head and spin in slow circles to realign the satellites. She looked like a confused weather vane awaiting instructions from space. She spun for so long she got dizzy and had to sit down. at which point her phone immediately reconnected because she had simply walked behind a large rock. Satellite crisis solved, dizziness not included. 30. A man canoeing saw ripples in the water and immediately leapt out, yelling, "It's coming!" while abandoning his canoe to drift majestically away. The terrifying threat? A school of fish, small ones, the kind you feed in ponds. Meanwhile, his canoe became the most ambitious runaway boat of the season, floating steadily toward the far bank while he stood in knee-deep water screaming like he'd narrowly escaped a kraken. The fish continued minding their business, emotionally unharmed but spiritually entertained. 31. A hiker panicked after hearing something rustling directly behind him, so he took off running, only to discover the sound kept up perfectly. Faster he ran, faster it rustled. Terrifying, right? Except it was his own jacket, one loose strap slapping rhythmically against his backpack like an overly enthusiastic percussionist. He sprinted until he tripped, rolled, and lay there gasping while the jacket continued its little drum solo. He looked behind him, saw the strap, and whispered, "Oh my God." Yes, oh my God indeed. Nature didn't humble him, physics did. And that's it, a full parade of outdoor panic proving humans are the real jump scare. Drop your own dumbest encounter below, vote on the worst one, and stick around for even weirder chaos next time.